I never thought a family vacation would be the thing to finally break me open and show me who I really was. But looking back now, I can see that everything led to that moment on the driveway, suitcase in hand, watching my entire family drive away without me. My name is Rebecca, and for 28 years I'd been the family peacekeeper, the one who smoothed over arguments at Thanksgiving dinner, the one who called everyone to make sure they were okay, the one who always put everyone else's needs before my own. My therapist had a fancy term for it, codependency, but I just thought I was being a good daughter, a good granddaughter, a good sister. It started 3 months before the trip. I was sitting in my tiny apartment, the one I could barely afford on my teacher's salary, when my phone rang. It was Grandma Judith. Grandma Judith, Grandma J as we all called her, was 82 years old and had more energy than most people half her age. She'd worked as a real estate agent for 40 years, invested wisely, and had built herself a comfortable nest egg. She was also the glue that held our fractured family together, or at least she tried to be. "Rebecca, sweetheart, I have the most wonderful news," she said, her voice crackling with excitement through the phone. "What is it, Grandma?" "I'm taking the whole family on a trip. 2 weeks in Italy. All expenses paid. I've already booked everything. We leave in 3 months." My heart did a little flip. Italy. I'd dreamed of going to Italy since I was a little girl, ever since I'd done a school project on the Renaissance and fallen in love with the art, the history, the culture. "Grandma, that's incredible. But that must cost a fortune." "Don't you worry about that, honey. I've been saving for something special, and what's more special than making memories with my family?" "Your dad, your mom, your brother Tyler, your sister Emma, your Uncle Frank and Aunt Caroline, and their kids. Everyone. Everyone." My stomach tightened slightly at that word. In our family, everyone came with complications. My dad, Robert, was Grandma J's only son. He was a successful corporate lawyer, the kind of man who wore expensive suits and had opinions about wine. He'd married my mom, Patricia, when they were both 23, and they'd built what looked from the outside like a perfect life. Big house in the suburbs, 3 kids, 2 cars, annual trips to the Bahamas. But I'd always felt like I didn't quite fit into their picture-perfect world. Tyler, my older brother, had followed in Dad's footsteps. He was a junior partner at a law firm, married to a woman named Stephanie who posted photos of their perfect life on social media constantly. Emma, my younger sister, was in medical school, on track to become a surgeon. And then there was me. Rebecca, the middle child, the teacher, the one who made $38,000 a year and lived in a 400-square-foot apartment with a radiator that clanked all night. I tried not to let it bother me. I loved teaching. I loved seeing kids' faces light up when they finally understood a difficult concept. I loved being the teacher that students remembered years later, the one who made them feel seen and heard. But at family gatherings, when Tyler talked about his latest case and Emma discussed her surgical rotations, I felt invisible. The weeks leading up to the trip were chaos. Group texts flew constantly. Dad appointed himself the unofficial trip coordinator, even though Grandma J had already booked everything. He created spreadsheets, itineraries, packing lists. He sent emails with subject lines like, "Mandatory family meeting regarding Italy trip and important. Passport verification required." I should have seen the warning signs then, but I was too caught up in my own excitement. I spent money I didn't have on new clothes for the trip. I practiced basic Italian phrases using a free app on my phone. I made lists of all the museums I wanted to visit, the foods I wanted to try, the small towns I wanted to explore. 2 weeks before the trip, Dad called a family dinner at his house. Grandma J was there, along with Mom, Tyler and Stephanie, Emma, and Uncle Frank's family. I drove over after a long day of parent-teacher conferences, still wearing my work clothes, a simple dress and cardigan that suddenly felt shabby compared to Stephanie's designer outfit. "All right, everyone," Dad said, standing at the head of the dining room table like he was addressing a board meeting. We need to go over the final details for the trip. Judith, thank you again for this incredibly generous gift. Everyone murmured agreement. Grandma J beamed from her seat. I've created a master itinerary, Dad continued, pulling out a thick folder. Each day is planned down to the hour. We'll be maximizing our time and ensuring we hit all the major attractions. Robert, Grandma J said gently, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but I want this trip to be relaxing. We don't need to schedule every minute. Dad's smile tightened. Of course, Mom, but with this many people, we need some structure. Otherwise, it'll be chaos. I watched this exchange with a familiar sinking feeling. Dad always did this, always took over, always had to be in control. And Grandma J, despite being the one who'd paid for everything, always let him. The dinner continued with Dad delegating responsibilities. Tyler was in charge of transportation logistics. Emma was handling restaurant reservations. Stephanie was managing the group chat. And me? Rebecca, you'll be in charge of keeping track of everyone's belongings, making sure nobody leaves anything behind. So I'm the baggage handler? I said, trying to make it sound like a joke, but I could hear the edge in my own voice. Someone has to do it, Dad said, not looking up from his spreadsheet. You're good at that kind of thing, keeping track of details. What he meant was, you're not important enough to have real responsibilities. But I didn't say that. I never said things like that. After dinner, I helped Grandma J to her car. She moved slower than she used to, and I'd noticed she got tired more easily. Rebecca, honey, are you excited about the trip? She asked, squeezing my hand. Of course, Grandma. It's going to be amazing. Thank you so much for doing this. You know why I wanted to do this, don't you? I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something in her eyes that made my chest tight. She looked older suddenly, more fragile. I want to see my family together. Really together. Not just at Christmas and Thanksgiving where everyone's on their phones and rushing off to other obligations. I want real time. Quality time. I'm not getting any younger, sweetheart. Grandma, don't talk like that. I'm 82 years old. I'm allowed to be realistic. She smiled, but it was sad around the edges. Promise me you'll really be present on this trip. Not just physically there, but really there. Really open to whatever happens. I promise, I said, having no idea what she was really asking of me. The night before we were supposed to leave, I couldn't sleep. I'd packed and repacked my suitcase 3 times. I'd checked and rechecked my passport, my boarding pass, my travel insurance. I'd set 4 alarms on my phone. We were all meeting at Dad's house at 5 in the morning to carpool to the airport together. The flight left at 9. When my first alarm went off at 3:30 in the morning, I was already awake. I showered, got dressed, did one final check of my apartment, and loaded my suitcase into my beat-up Honda Civic. The drive to Dad's house took 20 minutes, and I spent the whole time imagining walking through the streets of Rome, seeing the Colosseum, throwing a coin in the Trevi Fountain. I pulled up to Dad's house at 4:55. The lights were on inside, and I could see movement through the windows. Tyler's BMW was already in the driveway, along with Uncle Frank's SUV. I grabbed my suitcase and walked up to the front door, my heart pounding with excitement. Dad opened the door before I could knock. He was wearing travel clothes, khakis, and a polo shirt, and he had that look on his face that I knew too well. The look that meant he was about to deliver bad news but was going to pretend it wasn't a big deal. Rebecca, he said, we need to talk. Is everything okay? Is Grandma all right? Everyone's fine. Come in. I stepped inside, dragging my suitcase behind me. The living room was full of people and luggage. Mom was organizing passports. Tyler and Stephanie were on their phones. Emma was making coffee in the kitchen. Uncle Frank and Aunt Caroline were wrangling their teenage kids. And there, in the middle of it all, was Grandma J, sitting in Dad's favorite armchair, looking small and tired. What's going on? I asked, setting my suitcase down. Dad cleared his throat. So, there's been a little mix-up with the travel arrangements. What kind of mix-up? Well, when Mom booked the tickets, there was apparently a miscommunication about the number of people, and with the group rate she got, there's a limit to how many people can travel together. My stomach dropped. Okay, so what does that mean? It means we're one person over the limit. The room had gone quiet. Everyone was looking at me now. Or maybe they were deliberately not looking at me. It was hard to tell. So what happens? I asked, my voice coming out smaller than I intended. Well, someone has to stay behind, Dad said, and his tone was so casual, so matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. And we've all talked about it, and we think it makes the most sense for that person to be you. The words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what I was hearing. What? Tyler spoke up from across the room. It's nothing personal, Becca. It's just, well, you're not married, you don't have kids. It's easier for you to miss the trip. Easier? I repeated, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. And honestly, Stephanie added, you probably couldn't afford to do much over there anyway. With your salary, I mean. At least this way you won't have to feel bad about not being able to keep up with everyone else's spending. The room tilted slightly. I looked around at all these faces, these people I'd known my entire life, my family. And not one of them was meeting my eyes except Grandma J, who had tears running down her cheeks. Grandma, I said, my voice breaking, did you know about this? She shook her head. I just found out this morning. Robert told me right before you got here. Rebecca, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. I never meant for this to happen. Mom, Dad said, his voice sharp, we discussed this. You agreed it was the most practical solution. I agreed to nothing, Grandma J said, her voice stronger than I'd heard in months. You told me one person had to stay behind, and you'd already decided who. You didn't give me a choice. There is no choice, Dad said. Everyone else has obligations, responsibilities. Rebecca can reschedule. Reschedule what? I asked, and my voice was rising now, getting louder, shaking with emotion I'd kept bottled up for years. Reschedule my life? Reschedule my excitement? Reschedule the fact that I've been looking forward to this for 3 months? Rebecca, don't be dramatic, Mom said, finally speaking up. We'll plan another trip. Just the two of us. Mother-daughter time. But I wanted this trip. This family trip. I wanted to see Italy with all of you. And you will, Dad said. Just not this time. Look, we need to leave in 10 minutes or we'll miss our flight. We don't have time for an emotional scene. An emotional scene. That's what I was to him. An inconvenience. A problem to be managed. I looked at Emma, my sister, the person I'd shared a room with for 16 years. She was staring at her coffee cup like it was the most interesting thing in the world. Emma, I said, you're okay with this? She finally looked up, and I saw guilt in her eyes, but not enough to make her speak up. I'm sorry, Becca, but I can't miss this trip. I have to go back to school right after, and I'll be in rotations for the next 2 years. This is my only chance. And that's more important than me being there? She didn't answer. Her silence was answer enough. I turned to Tyler. You too? You're fine with this? He shrugged. Actually shrugged, like we were discussing what to have for dinner. Like I said, nothing personal. It's just logistics. Logistics. I was a logistics problem. I felt something crack inside me then. Something that had been holding me together for 28 years. The part of me that bent and flexed and accommodated and made myself smaller so everyone else could be comfortable. The part that said yes when I meant no. That smiled when I wanted to cry. That stayed quiet when I wanted to scream. No, I said. What? Dad looked at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. No, this isn't okay. This isn't fair. Grandma paid for this trip for everyone, and you don't get to just exclude me because it's convenient. Rebecca, be reasonable, Dad started, but I cut him off. I am being reasonable. You're being cruel. All of you. You're being selfish and cruel, and you're acting like it's no big deal to just cut me out of a family trip like I don't matter. We're not saying you don't matter, Mom said, but I could hear the impatience in her voice. We're saying you're the most flexible option. You mean I'm the least important. That's not what we're saying. But it's what you mean, isn't it? Tyler's important because he's a lawyer. Emma's important because she's going to be a doctor. But I'm just a teacher. I'm just Rebecca. I don't have a fancy job or a husband or kids, so I don't count. Now you're putting words in our mouths, Dad said. Am I? Then tell me, Dad. Look me in the eye and tell me that if Tyler or Emma had been the odd person out, you would have made the same decision. Tell me you would have left one of them behind. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. We all knew the truth. I looked at Grandma J again. She was crying openly now, her hands shaking. Grandma, I said softly, I know this isn't your fault. I know you wanted everyone to be there. But I can't stay. I can't sit here in Dad's house while you all go to Italy. I can't smile and wave and pretend this is okay. I picked up my suitcase and headed for the door. Behind me, I heard Dad sigh heavily. Rebecca, don't be childish about this. I stopped, my hand on the doorknob, and turned back. Childish? I'm being childish? You excluded me from a family trip, lied about it being a booking error, didn't have the decency to tell me before I showed up here at 5 a.m, and I'm the one being childish? We'll talk about this when we get back, he said, checking his watch. But right now we need to go or we'll miss our flight. And just like that, I didn't matter anymore. The conversation was over. The decision had been made. I was dismissed. I walked out of that house, put my suitcase in my car, and sat in the driver's seat for a long moment. Through the windshield, I watched them all file out of the house with their luggage. I watched them load up the cars. I watched Tyler help Grandma J into the passenger seat of Uncle Frank's SUV. I watched Dad check his watch again, hurry everyone along. Not one of them came over to my car. Not one of them knocked on my window to say goodbye or apologize or tell me they'd miss me. They just left. I drove home in a daze. Mind-sected, The sun was coming up, painting the sky pink and gold, and I thought about how right now I should have been on my way to the airport. I should have been excited, nervous, happy. Instead, I felt hollow. Back at my apartment, I dragged my suitcase inside and just stood there in the middle of my tiny living room. The walls felt like they were closing in. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't spend the next 2 weeks in this apartment, going to work, pretending everything was fine, knowing my entire family was in Italy without me. I called my principal, something I'd never done before. I told her I had a family emergency and needed to use my personal days. She was surprised I'd never taken an unplanned day off in 4 years of teaching, but she approved it. Then I sat down on my couch and did something I'd been avoiding for months. I called my best friend from college, Maya. Maya had been telling me for years that my family treated me like garbage. She'd said it gently at first, then more firmly as time went on. We'd grown apart over the last few years, partly because she'd moved to Seattle for work, but mostly because I'd gotten tired of hearing the truth about my family. The phone rang 3 times before she picked up. Rebecca? Is everything okay? And that's when I started crying. Really crying. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and primal, the kind you can't control or stop. I told her everything. The trip, the exclusion, the way they'd all just let it happen. Maya listened without interrupting, and when I finally ran out of words, she was quiet for a moment. Okay, she said. Here's what you're going to do. You're going to pack a bag with comfortable clothes. You're going to get in your car and drive to Seattle. It's a 17-hour drive, so you'll need to stop overnight, but you can be here by tomorrow night. And then you're going to stay with me for 2 weeks, and we're going to figure out what you really want from your life. Maya, I can't just run away. You're not running away. You're running toward something, toward people who actually value you. Toward a life that isn't centered on making everyone else comfortable at your own expense. I don't know. Yes, you do. You know this isn't okay, you know they were wrong, and you know you can't go back to normal after this. Something has to change, Rebecca. Might as well start now. She was right. I knew she was right. But knowing something and doing something about it are two very different things. I packed a bag. Just the basics, clothes and toiletries and my laptop. I left my teaching materials at home. I wrote a note to my neighbor asking her to water my plants. And then I got in my car and started driving. The first few hours were weird. I kept second-guessing myself, kept reaching for my phone to call my parents and apologize, kept thinking I should turn around and go home. But Maya called me every few hours to check in, to keep me going, to remind me why I'd left. I stopped for the night in a cheap motel in Idaho. The room smelled like stale cigarettes, and the mattress was lumpy, but I slept better than I had in months. Something about being away from home, away from the weight of everyone's expectations, made it easier to breathe. I got to Maya's apartment in Seattle late the next evening. She lived in a small but bright one-bedroom in Capitol Hill, with big windows and plants everywhere and art on the walls. It felt like the opposite of my cramped, dark apartment back home. She opened the door and pulled me into a hug without saying anything. I dropped my bag and hugged her back, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time someone had hugged me like that. Like they were genuinely happy to see me. Like my presence mattered. Over the next few days, Maya and I fell into a rhythm. She worked from home most days, so we'd have coffee together in the morning. Then I'd go explore the city while she worked. I walked for hours, through Pike Place Market and along the waterfront and up steep hills with stunning views. I sat in coffee shops and read books I'd been meaning to read for years. I went to museums and galleries and just looked at art without worrying about anyone else's schedule or preferences. The first time I went to Pike Place Market, I got lost in the crowds and the noise and the energy. I watched the fishmongers throw salmon back and forth, tourists cheering and taking photos. I bought fresh flowers from a vendor who told me about each variety with such passion that I ended up buying 3 bouquets just to keep listening to her talk. I ate my way through the market, trying samples of cheese and chocolate and fresh fruit, not worrying about the cost or whether I should save my money. There was this moment, standing at a window overlooking Elliott Bay, eating a warm apple fritter from the Daily Dozen Donut Company, watching the ferries come and go, when I realized I was smiling, just smiling for no reason. Not because I was supposed to, or because someone expected it, but because I was genuinely happy in that moment. I called Maya. "I'm standing here eating a donut and watching boats, and I'm happy," I said, and I started crying right there in public. "That's allowed, you know," she said gently, "being happy. You're allowed to just exist and enjoy things without justifying it or earning it or apologizing for it." But I'd spent so long believing I had to earn happiness, had to be perfect enough or useful enough or invisible enough to deserve good things. The idea that I could just be happy, just because, felt revolutionary. I started keeping a journal during those weeks in Seattle. Not the kind where I wrote about what happened each day, but the kind where I wrote about what I was feeling, what I was discovering about myself. I wrote about the guilt I felt for leaving my family. I wrote about the anger I'd been suppressing for years. I wrote about the fear that I'd made a huge mistake, that I'd end up alone and broke and full of regret. But I also wrote about the small joys. The barista at the coffee shop near Maya's apartment, who learned my order after 3 visits. The elderly man I met on a bench in Volunteer Park who told me stories about Seattle in the 1960s. The feeling of walking down a street where nobody knew me, where I could be anyone, where I wasn't defined by my family's expectations or disappointments. One afternoon, I was walking through the Fremont neighborhood when I stumbled upon a small art gallery. The sign outside said they were having an open studio day, and something made me walk in. Inside, there were maybe a dozen people, all working on different projects: painting, sculpting, drawing. A woman at the front desk smiled at me. "First time here?" she asked. "Yeah, I was just walking by." "We do open studio every week. Anyone can come. You don't have to be an artist. You just have to want to create something." "I haven't made art since high school," I said. "Then it sounds like you're overdue." She set me up with some watercolors and paper, showed me where the brushes were, and left me alone. I sat there for a long moment, staring at the blank page, feeling completely out of my depth. I'd always loved art, but I'd stopped making it years ago. Dad had made it clear that art wasn't practical, wasn't useful, wasn't worth pursuing. Better to focus on things that mattered, like grades and resumes and career advancement. But sitting there in that studio, with the afternoon light coming through the windows and the quiet sounds of other people creating around me, I picked up a brush and started painting. I had no plan, no vision, no goal. I just let the brush move and the colors blend and something emerge. What came out was a mess, honestly. Abstract shapes in blues and greens and purples, nothing recognizable or polished or good. But it was mine. I'd made it. And for the first time in as long as I could remember, I'd done something just for the joy of doing it, not because it would impress anyone or advance my career or make me more valuable. I went back to that studio 3 more times before I left Seattle. Each time, I made something messy and imperfect and entirely my own. And each time, I felt a little more like I was reclaiming parts of myself I'd lost somewhere along the way. And slowly, very slowly, I started to feel like myself again. Or maybe I started to discover who myself actually was, underneath all the people-pleasing and accommodating and making myself small. On the 5th day, Maya came home from a meeting and found me sitting on her couch, staring at my phone. "They're posting photos on Facebook," I said. "Look." I showed her my dad's profile. There were dozens of photos. Tyler and Stephanie at the Coliseum, Emma eating gelato, Uncle Frank and Aunt Caroline at a vineyard, Grandma Jay standing in front of a fountain, smiling but looking tired. The captions were all about family and togetherness and once-in-a-lifetime experiences. Not one person had called or texted me since they'd left. "You know what the worst part is?" I said. "I'm still hoping they'll reach out. I'm still checking my phone every 5 minutes like some pathetic puppy waiting for its owner to come home." Maya sat down next to me. "That's not pathetic. That's human. You love them. You want them to love you back the same way. There's nothing wrong with that, but they don't, do they? Love me the same way." I don't know. Maybe they do, in their own broken way. But that doesn't mean their love is healthy for you. How do you stop loving people who hurt you? I don't think you do. I think you just learn to love yourself more. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about what Maya had said. I kept thinking about my life back home, my tiny apartment, my job that I loved but that paid barely enough to survive, my family who seemed to see me as an afterthought at best. At 2 a.m, I got up and opened my laptop. I started writing. Not a list or a journal entry, but a letter to my dad. I wrote about how it felt to be excluded. I wrote about all the times over the years I'd felt invisible, unimportant, less than. I wrote about Tyler's law school graduation, where Dad had made a speech about how proud he was and how no one had said anything when I got my teaching degree. I wrote about Emma's white coat ceremony, where Mom had cried with joy and how no one had come to my first day as a teacher. I wrote about family dinners where my accomplishments were glossed over in 30 seconds before moving on to Tyler's latest case or Emma's latest rotation. I wrote and wrote and wrote until the sun came up and my hands were cramping and I'd filled 10 pages. And then I read it over and I deleted it all, because I realized something. It didn't matter if I sent the letter. It didn't matter if I explained how I felt. They knew how I felt. They had to know. They just didn't care enough to change. The real question wasn't how to make them understand. The real question was what I was going to do about it. Over the next week, Maya and I had long conversations about my job, my life, my family, my future. She asked me questions no one had ever asked before. What did I actually want? Not what my parents wanted, not what seemed practical or responsible, but what I, Rebecca, actually wanted from my life. It was harder to answer than I expected. I'd spent so long trying to fit into everyone else's expectations that I'd lost track of my own dreams. But slowly, with Maya's help, I started to figure it out. I wanted to feel valued. I wanted to be around people who appreciated me. I wanted to stop shrinking myself to make others comfortable. I wanted to matter. And I wanted to teach, really teach, in a way that made a difference. Maya's girlfriend, Amanda, was a principal at an alternative high school in Seattle, a school for kids who'd struggled in traditional settings. Over dinner one night, Amanda mentioned they were looking for an English teacher. "You should apply," she said, looking at me. "Maya tells me you're great with kids." "I couldn't just move to Seattle," I said automatically. "I have a job back home." "Do you have a life back home?" Maya asked. "Really?" I opened my mouth to say yes, of course I did, but the words didn't come. Because the truth was, I didn't. I had a job I loved, and an apartment I could barely afford, and a family that didn't value me. That wasn't a life. That was just existing. 2 days before my family was due to return from Italy, I applied for the job. I sent in my resume, my teaching portfolio, letters of recommendation. I didn't tell anyone back home what I was doing. I didn't post about it on social media. I just applied and tried not to think about what it would mean if they called me for an interview. They called the next day. The interview was 3 days later, and I was more nervous than I'd been in years. But the moment I walked into the school and saw the kids in the hallway, heard the energy and the chaos and the life, I felt something click into place. The interview was with Amanda and 2 other administrators. They asked about my teaching philosophy, my experience with struggling students, my approach to classroom management, and for the first time in my career, I didn't try to give the answers I thought they wanted to hear. I just told them the truth. I told them about the kid in my class last year who everyone had written off as a troublemaker, and how I'd stayed after school with him twice a week to work on his reading, and how he'd ended up passing the state test and writing me a thank you note that I still kept in my desk drawer. I told them about the girl who was so anxious about speaking in class that she'd start shaking, and how I'd worked with her to find other ways to participate, and how by the end of the year she'd volunteered to read her essay aloud to the whole class. I told them that teaching wasn't about test scores or college prep or checking boxes. It was about seeing kids as whole people, meeting them where they were, and helping them discover that they were capable of more than they thought. When I left the interview, I felt lighter than I had in years. Even if they didn't hire me, even if I had to go back home and figure out a different plan, I'd been honest. I'd been myself. And that felt like a victory. My family got back from Italy on a Wednesday. I knew because the Facebook post stopped and the group chat suddenly came alive with messages about baggage claim and who was driving who home, and wasn't that the most amazing trip. No one messaged me directly, not even Grandma Jay. I was sitting in a coffee shop when Amanda called. They wanted to offer me the job. It would start at the beginning of the next school year, which gave me 2 months to relocate and get settled. The salary was actually better than what I was making back home, enough that I could afford a decent apartment and not have to eat ramen 3 nights a week. I said yes before she'd even finished explaining the benefits package. That night, I called Grandma Jay. She answered on the second ring. Rebecca, sweetheart, I've been wanting to call you, but I didn't know what to say. How was the trip, Grandma? She was quiet for a moment. It was beautiful. Italy is everything you dreamed it would be. But it wasn't complete without you. I couldn't enjoy it knowing you should have been there. Did anyone else feel that way? Another pause. Your father kept saying you were being immature. Tyler and Emma didn't talk about it, but I could tell something was wrong. The energy was off. We were together, but we weren't really together. Does that make sense? Yeah, Grandma. It does. I'm so sorry, Rebecca. I should have fought harder. I should have told Robert no, that we'd reschedule the whole trip before we'd exclude you. But I'm old, and I was tired, and I let him convince me it would be fine. It wasn't fine. No, I said. It wasn't. But that's not your fault. You wanted to do something nice for the family. You didn't create this problem. Dad did, and everyone else who went along with it. What are you going to do now? I took a deep breath. I'm moving to Seattle. I got a new teaching job. I'm giving my notice at school tomorrow and packing up my apartment next week. Seattle? Rebecca, that's so far away. I know, but I need to be far away right now. I need to be somewhere where people see me as more than just the family backup plan. Grandma J started crying. I don't blame you. I don't blame you one bit, but I'm going to miss you terribly. I'll visit, I promise. And you can come see me too. I'll show you Seattle. We can go to Pike Place Market and see the first Starbucks and take a ferry to the islands. I'd like that, she said softly. Rebecca, can I ask you something? Anything. Are you happy? Or at least are you on your way to being happy? I thought about it. About Maya's apartment with the big windows and all the plants. About the long walks through Seattle and the quiet mornings and the feeling of being able to breathe fully for the first time in years. About the new job, the new start, the new life I was building. Yeah, Grandma. I think I am. Good. That's all I ever wanted for you, you know. For all my grandchildren. I wanted you to be happy. I'm just sorry it took this for you to find it. After I hung up with Grandma J, I sat there for a long time, staring at my phone. I knew I needed to tell my parents. I knew there would be drama, accusations of being rash and irresponsible and immature, but for once, I didn't care. I called my dad. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice distracted. Rebecca. What is it? I'm in the middle of something. I'm calling to let you know I'm moving to Seattle. I got a new teaching job. I'm leaving at the end of the month. There was a long silence. What are you talking about? I'm moving. I got a job offer at a school in Seattle, and I accepted it. Rebecca, you can't just pick up and move across the country. What about your apartment, your job, your commitments? I'm an adult, Dad. I can do whatever I want. I'm giving proper notice at school. I'm breaking my lease. I'm making it work. This is because of the Italy trip, isn't it? I knew you'd overreact. Overreact? You excluded me from a family vacation and didn't even have the decency to tell me until I showed up at your house. And you think I'm overreacting by making a change in my life? It was a logistical issue, Rebecca. We explained this. Someone had to stay behind. And it had to be me because I'm the least important. I get it, Dad. I've always gotten it. I'm just finally doing something about it. You're being dramatic and impulsive. You'll regret this. Maybe I will. But at least I'll be making my own mistakes instead of living my life trying to please people who don't appreciate me anyway. If you do this, don't expect us to bail you out when it doesn't work. I never expected you to bail me out, Dad. I've been on my own this whole time. You just didn't notice. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, but I felt exhilarated. I'd done it. I'd actually stood up for myself, set a boundary, made a choice that was mine and mine alone. Mom called 10 minutes later. Then Tyler. Then Emma. They all said variations of the same thing. I was being rash. I was being emotional. I needed to think this through. I was making a huge mistake. I let their calls go to voicemail. I was done explaining myself. I was done justifying my choices. I was done trying to make them understand. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. I gave my notice at school, and my principal was sad but supportive. Some of my students cried when I told them I was leaving, which made me cry too. But I also felt excited, energized in a way I hadn't felt in years. I packed up my apartment, donated half my stuff, and loaded the rest into my car. I said goodbye to the few friends I had in town, promised to stay in touch. And on a warm morning in June, I drove away from the only home I'd ever known. Maya helped me move into my new apartment, a sunny one-bedroom in Fremont with hardwood floors and a view of the Ship Canal. It was more expensive than my old place, but I could actually afford it on my new salary. I bought furniture from IKEA and plants from a local nursery and art from a street fair. I made the space mine in a way my old apartment never had been. The new job started in August. I was nervous that first day, standing in front of a classroom full of teenagers who'd been told by other teachers and other schools that they were problems, that they were too much, that they'd never succeed. I looked at them, and I saw myself. Different circumstances, different struggles, but the same core feeling. The feeling of being dismissed, of being seen as less than, of being told you don't matter. "My name is Miss Rebecca," I said. "Not Miss Patterson, not Miss P, just Miss Rebecca. And I want you to know something right now, on day one. You all matter. Every single one of you. I don't care what anyone else has told you, or how many schools you've been kicked out of, or how many teachers have given up on you. You matter to me." One kid in the back, a tall boy with a nose ring and an attitude, snorted. "Yeah, right. That's what they all say at first. You're right. A lot of teachers probably have said that. But I'm going to prove it. I'm going to show up every day. I'm going to learn your names and your stories. I'm going to push you when you need pushing and support you when you need support. And I'm not going anywhere. I spent that first year proving it. I stayed late to help kids with their essays. I showed up to their basketball games and poetry slams and art shows. I called home when they were struggling, not to complain, but to partner with families to figure out solutions. I fought for them in staff meetings, advocated for second chances and accommodations and understanding. There was this one student, Marcus, 16 years old, tall and lanky with a chip on his shoulder the size of Mount Rainier. He'd been expelled from 2 schools already for fighting. His file was thick with incident reports and suspension notices and notes from teachers who'd given up on him. The first week of school, he sat in the back corner of my classroom with his hood up and his headphones in, radiating hostility. When I asked him to remove the headphones, he looked at me with such contempt that I felt it like a physical blow. "Why should I?" he said. "This class is pointless. School is pointless. You're just another teacher who's going to pretend to care for like a week and then give up on me like everyone else." "You're probably right," I said, and he looked surprised. "I'm probably going to mess up. I'm probably going to say the wrong thing sometimes or make mistakes or disappoint you. But I'm not going to give up on you." "Even when you try to push me away, even when you make it really hard, I'm going to keep showing up. That's my promise to you." He stared at me for a long moment, then put his headphones back in. But I noticed, over the next few weeks, that he started sitting closer to the front, that he started doing some of the work, even if he pretended not to care. That he started listening, even when he acted like he wasn't. 2 months into the school year, Marcus came to my classroom after school. I was grading papers, and I looked up to find him standing in the doorway like he might bolt at any second. "Can I talk to you?" he asked. "Of course. Come in." He sat down, fidgeting with his backpack strap. "So, there's this writing contest for high school students. And I wrote something, but I don't know if it's any good. And I thought maybe you could look at it. But if you're busy, that's cool. I can just forget about it." He was talking fast, nervous, completely different from the hostile kid I'd met on the first day of school. I'd love to read it, I said. He pulled out a crumpled piece of notebook paper covered in tight, careful handwriting. I smoothed it out and started reading, and within the first paragraph, I had tears in my eyes. It was an essay about his older brother, who'd been killed in a drive-by shooting 3 years earlier. About how Marcus had tried to be tough, to not cry, to act like it didn't destroy him. About how he'd gotten angry instead of sad because anger felt safer. About how he'd pushed everyone away because he was terrified of caring about anyone again and losing them too. It was raw and honest and beautiful and heartbreaking. "Marcus, this is incredible," I said, looking up at him. "This is some of the best writing I've ever read from a high school student." "For real?" His voice was small, uncertain. "For real. You should absolutely submit this to the contest. And you should keep writing. You have a real gift." His eyes filled with tears, and he blinked them away quickly. "No one's ever said that to me before, that I'm good at something. Well, you are. You're really good at this, and I'm honored that you trusted me enough to show me." He submitted the essay. He won second place in the citywide contest. When I told him, he cried right there in my classroom, not caring who saw. And when he graduated 2 years later, he was accepted to 3 different colleges with scholarships. He came back to thank me, and he brought his mom, who hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. "You saved my son," she said. "You saw him when everyone else had given up. But I hadn't saved him. He'd saved himself. I'd just shown up and refused to leave." There was Jasmine, a 15-year-old girl who hadn't spoken in class for the entire first semester. She'd been sexually assaulted by a family member, and the trauma had stolen her voice. Other teachers had stopped calling on her, had started treating her like she was invisible. I didn't push her to speak out loud. Instead, I let her write her responses, let her communicate in whatever way felt safe. I started leaving notes on her assignments, not just grades, but real responses to her ideas, questions that showed I was really reading and thinking about her work. 3 months in, I assigned a personal narrative essay. Jasmine turned in a piece about a girl who lived in silence, about how silence could be a shield but also a prison. It was coded, obviously about her own experience, but written in third person, and it was stunning. I wrote a long response on her essay. I thanked her for trusting me with her story. I told her that her voice, whether spoken or written, mattered. I told her that I saw her, really saw her, and that she was brave and strong and not broken, even if she felt that way sometimes. The next day, she came to my classroom after school. She still didn't speak, but she handed me a note. It said, "Thank you for not giving up on me. You're the first teacher who's made me feel like I still exist." By the end of the year, Jasmine was speaking in class again. Quietly at first, then with more confidence. She joined the school newspaper. She started writing poetry. And when she graduated, she gave a speech at the senior assembly about finding her voice again. There was David, who was homeless and living in his car with his mom. There was Aisha, who was raising her 2 younger siblings because her parents were addicts. There was Chris, who was transgender and facing constant harassment from other students. There was Maria, who was undocumented and terrified that her family would be deported. Every single one of them taught me something. About resilience, about courage, about what it means to keep going when everything is stacked against you. They made me a better teacher, a better person. They showed me what real strength looked like. It was exhausting. It was challenging. It was the hardest I'd ever worked in my life. And it was also the most fulfilling thing I'd ever done. I didn't talk to my dad for 3 months. Mom sent occasional texts that I mostly ignored. Tyler and Emma didn't reach out at all, but Grandma Jay called me every Sunday. She wanted to hear about my students, my apartment, my new life. She told me stories about Italy, but also about how the family had fractured since the trip. "Your father and Uncle Frank got into a huge fight in Rome," she told me. About money, about respect, about old grievances from 40 years ago. They haven't spoken since we got back. I'm sorry, Grandma. Don't be. Maybe it needed to happen. Maybe that trip showed all of us things we'd been avoiding. Your father's need to control everything, Tyler's selfishness, Emma's avoidance, my own weakness in not standing up for you when it mattered. You're not weak, Grandma. I felt weak. I feel weak. But talking to you every week, hearing about your new life, it makes me feel stronger. You did what I couldn't do. You chose yourself. Thanksgiving came. Dad sent a group email about dinner at his house, same as every year. I didn't respond. Maya invited me to spend the holiday with her and Amanda's family, and I said yes. The days leading up to Thanksgiving were hard in ways I didn't expect. I kept thinking about previous Thanksgivings, the traditions I'd grown up with, Mom's stuffing that she made from her grandmother's recipe, the way Grandma J always insisted on saying a long grace where she listed everything she was thankful for, including each family member by name. The sound of football games playing on the TV in the background, the smell of pumpkin pie cooling on the counter. I knew I'd made the right choice not to go home, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt. The night before Thanksgiving, I couldn't sleep. I got up and sat on my couch in the dark, looking out at the lights of Seattle, feeling very far from home. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Emma. I miss you. I know you're not coming tomorrow, and I understand why, but I want you to know that it won't be the same without you. Nothing's been the same since you left. I stared at that text for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond with anger, to remind her that she'd stood by silently while Dad excluded me, that she'd chosen her own convenience over defending me. But another part of me, the part that was learning to be more honest and less bitter, just felt sad. I miss you too, I texted back, but I can't come home yet. Maybe not for a long time. I need to take care of myself first. Her response came immediately. I know. I'm proud of you for that. I wish I was brave enough to do the same. What do you mean? I hate medical school. I'm miserable. But I can't quit because Dad would be so disappointed. Because I've already invested so much time and money. Because everyone expects me to become Dr. Emma Patterson. Sometimes I'm so jealous of you I can barely stand it. You got out. You chose yourself. I'm still here trying to be who everyone else wants me to be. I sat there reading and rereading her text, and I realized that I'd been so focused on my own pain, my own story, that I'd never really thought about what Emma might be going through. I'd cast her as the golden child, the successful one, the favorite. But maybe she was just as trapped as I'd been, just in a different cage. It's not too late, I texted. You can still choose yourself. It's scary, but it's possible. Maybe, she wrote back. Anyway, have a good Thanksgiving. I love you. I love you too. Thanksgiving Day with Maya and Amanda's family was wonderful in a completely unexpected way. Amanda's parents were warm and welcoming, asking about my teaching and my life in Seattle without any judgment or comparison. Her brother was funny and kind, telling stories that had everyone laughing until we cried. Her sister brought her girlfriend, and they were so obviously in love, so comfortable being themselves, that I felt something shift in my chest. This was what family could be. People who chose to be together, who supported each other, who created space for everyone to be authentic. When it was time to say what we were thankful for, I started crying before I even opened my mouth. I'm thankful for second chances, I managed to say. I'm thankful for people who see you and value you and remind you that you matter. I'm thankful for the courage to leave what wasn't working and the grace to build something new. Maya reached over and squeezed my hand. Amanda's mom smiled at me with such kindness that I had to look away, and I realized that I was building a new family, one that wasn't based on blood or obligation, but on genuine love and respect. After dinner, I helped Amanda's mom with the dishes. She was quiet for a while, just washing and rinsing, before she spoke. Maya told me a little bit about your situation, about your family. I hope you don't mind? I don't mind, I said. I want you to know something. Family isn't just the people you're born to. Family is the people who show up for you, who see you, who make space for you to be fully yourself. And you're always welcome at this table. Always. I set down the dish I was drying and hugged her. She hugged me back without asking why, and I thought about how sometimes the greatest kindness is just accepting someone's emotions without needing to fix them or explain them away. Sitting around a table with people who weren't related to me by blood but who'd shown me more kindness and acceptance in 6 months than my own family had in years, I felt something I'd never felt at a family holiday before. I felt like I belonged. In December, on a rainy Seattle afternoon, my phone rang. It was Grandma J, but she sounded different, strained. "Rebecca, sweetheart, I need to tell you something." My heart dropped. "What is it?" "I'm sick. It's cancer. Ovarian. They caught it late. The doctors say I have maybe 6 months." The world tilted. "No. No, Grandma, you can't. I'm 83 years old. I've had a good life. A long life. But there are things I need to do before I go, and one of them is seeing you. I'll come visit. As soon as school lets out for winter break." I was hoping you'd say that. "But Rebecca, I need to ask you something. Will you come to Christmas dinner? At your father's house? I know that's a lot to ask, but it might be my last Christmas, and I want all my grandchildren there." "Rebecca, sweetheart, I need to tell you something." My heart dropped. "What is it?" "I'm sick. It's cancer. Ovarian. They caught it late. The doctors say I have maybe 6 months. The world tilted. "No. No, Grandma, you can't. I'm 83 years old. I've had a good life, a long life. But there are things I need to do before I go, and one of them is seeing you. I'll come visit, as soon as school lets out for winter break." I was hoping you'd say that. "But Rebecca, I need to ask you something. Will you come to Christmas dinner? At your father's house? I know that's a lot to ask, but it might be my last Christmas, and I want all my grandchildren there." I closed my eyes. The thought of going back to Dad's house, of facing all of them, made my stomach churn. But this was Grandma J, the woman who'd always tried to make me feel special, even when everyone else made me feel invisible. "Grandma, I don't know if I can. They hurt me. Really hurt me. And I don't know if I'm ready to face them yet. I understand, sweetheart. I do. And I would never force you, but I'm asking, not for them, for me. Because I love you, and I want to see you one more time with the rest of the family. I want one more chance to have all my grandchildren together." Her voice broke on the last word, and I could hear her crying softly. My own eyes filled with tears. "Okay," I said finally. "For you, I'll come. But I'm not promising to be nice. I'm not promising to pretend everything is fine." "I don't want you to pretend," she said. "I want you to be honest. I want you to be yourself. That's all I've ever wanted for you." After we hung up, I sat on my couch for a long time, staring at nothing. Maya came home from a meeting and found me there. "What's wrong?" she asked immediately, sitting down next to me. "Grandma J has cancer. 6 months, maybe, and she wants me to come home for Christmas. Are you going to go?" I said I would. "But Maya, I don't know if I can do this." Seeing them all, being in that house again, pretending to be a family when we're not really a family at all. Maya took my hand. "You're not the same person who left there 6 months ago. You're stronger now. You know your worth. They can't take that away from you anymore. What if they try? Then you leave. You get up, you walk out, and you come back here to people who actually love you. You're not trapped anymore, Rebecca. You have a choice now. You always have a choice." The flight home felt surreal. I kept thinking about how much had changed since I'd driven away from my tiny apartment 6 months earlier. I had a new job, a new life, new confidence. But I was also terrified that going back would undo all of that I'd slip back into old patterns, that I'd become invisible Rebecca again. The flight home was strange. I'd only been gone 6 months, but it felt like a lifetime. I'd changed so much. I carried myself differently. I spoke with more confidence. I knew who I was in a way I never had before. Maya drove me to the airport. "You sure you're ready for this?" she asked. "No," I said honestly, "but I need to do it. Not for them. For me. To prove to myself that I can face them and not crumble." Christmas Eve dinner was at Dad's house, same as always. I showed up exactly on time, carrying a bottle of wine I'd bought at a Seattle winery and a sense of dread in my stomach. Dad opened the door. For a moment, we just stared at each other. "Rebecca," he said finally, "you came." I said I would. I stepped inside. The house looked the same, smelled the same, but I felt different being in it. Everyone was in the living room. Mom, Tyler and Stephanie, Emma, Uncle Frank and Aunt Caroline and their kids. And Grandma Jay, sitting in the same chair she'd been in the morning of the Italy trip, looking frailer than I'd ever seen her. She stood up when she saw me, or tried to, and I rushed over to hug her. She felt so small in my arms, so fragile, like she might break. "I'm so glad you're here," she whispered. Dinner was awkward. Conversation was stilted. Everyone talked about surface things, work and weather and holiday plans. No one mentioned Italy. No one mentioned my move to Seattle. No one mentioned the fact that we'd barely spoken in 6 months. Until Grandma Jay cleared her throat and set down her fork. "I have something to say," she announced. Everyone stopped eating and looked at her. "As you all know, I'm dying. I probably won't see another Christmas. And before I go, I need to say some things that I should have said months ago." "Mom," Dad said, "you don't have to do this." "Yes, Robert, I do." She looked at me, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Rebecca, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't fight for you. I'm sorry I let your father exclude you from the trip. I'm sorry I've watched for years as this family took you for granted, and I never said anything strong enough to make them stop. Grandma, you don't need to apologize. Yes, I do. And so does everyone else at this table." She turned to Dad. "Robert, you're my son, and I love you. But you're a bully. You control people. You make decisions for everyone else without considering their feelings or their needs. You excluded your own daughter from a family trip I paid for, and you didn't even have the decency to feel guilty about it." Dad's face went red. "Mom, that's not fair. It's completely fair." "And Tyler," she continued, turning to my brother. "You're so focused on being successful and looking good that you've forgotten how to be kind. You have a sister who would do anything for you, and you treat her like she's an inconvenience." Tyler opened his mouth, then closed it again. "Emma," Grandma Jay said, her voice gentler, "you avoid conflict so much that you let terrible things happen without speaking up. Your sister needed you to defend her, and you were silent. That's as bad as actively hurting her." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I know," she whispered. "I know, and I'm sorry." Grandma Jay looked around the table. "I spent $100,000 on that Italy trip because I wanted to bring this family together. I wanted us to make memories, to be close, to remember what's important. Instead, it showed me exactly what's wrong with us. We're not really a family. We're just people who share DNA and obligation, and that's heartbreaking." The room was silent. I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. "Rebecca," Grandma Jay said, looking at me again, "you're the bravest person at this table. You chose yourself. You built a new life. You didn't wait for anyone's permission or approval. You just did what you needed to do to be happy. I'm so proud of you." "Thank you, Grandma," I managed to say, my voice thick with emotion. She turned back to the rest of the family. "I hope you all think about what I've said. I hope you think about what you lost when you pushed Rebecca away. Because let me tell you, you lost more than she did. She's thriving. She's happy. Can any of you say the same?" No one answered. After dinner, I helped Grandma Jay to the guest room where she was staying. She was tired, the conversation had drained her, but she seemed lighter somehow. relieved. Did you mean all that? I asked. About being proud of me? Every word, she said, taking my hand. You know what I realized on that Italy trip? I realized that I'd spent my whole life trying to keep everyone happy, just like you did. I made myself smaller so Robert could feel big. I stayed quiet so there wouldn't be conflict. I paid for things and planned things and tried to create family harmony. But you can't force people to be good to each other. They have to choose it. So what do? We live our lives. We love the people who love us back the right way. We let go of the people who don't. And we don't feel guilty about it. That night, I slept in my old bedroom in Dad's house, in the bed I'd slept in as a teenager. I looked at the ceiling, at the glow-in-the-dark stars I'd put up when I was 12, and I thought about everything that had changed. I thought about the girl I'd been, the one who would have done anything for her family's approval, the one who made herself invisible so everyone else could shine, the one who believed that if she was just good enough, patient enough, accommodating enough, they'd finally see her value. And I thought about the woman I'd become, the one who'd packed up her life and moved across the country, the one who'd stood up for herself, set boundaries, chosen her own happiness, the one who'd learned that being brave didn't mean not being scared. It meant doing the thing anyway. The next morning, I said goodbye to Grandma J. We both cried, knowing it might be the last time we saw each other. Come visit me in Seattle, I said, while you still can. I'll take you to all my favorite places. I will, she promised. I'm not dead yet. Dad walked me to my car. For a moment, we stood there in his driveway, the same place where I'd watched them all drive away 6 months earlier. Rebecca, he said, your grandmother had some valid points last night. Some? I raised an eyebrow. He looked uncomfortable. Okay, many valid points. I've been thinking about what she said, about how we treated you, about the Italy trip. And I'm not ready to say you were right to move away. I still think you overreacted, but I can admit that we could have handled the situation better. Could have? Dad, you excluded me from a family vacation and made me feel like I didn't matter. That's not poor handling. That's cruel. He flinched. I didn't mean to be cruel, but you were. And the worst part is, it wasn't even about Italy. It was about 28 years of being treated like I was less important than Tyler or Emma. Less successful, less valuable, less worthy of respect and consideration. That's not how we see you. Then how do you see me, Dad? Really? He struggled for an answer, and I realized he didn't have one. He'd never thought about how he saw me. He'd never had to. I need to go, I said, opening my car door. I have a flight to catch. Will you come visit again? I don't know. Maybe. If things change. I drove to the airport, returned my rental car, and sat at the gate waiting for my flight back to Seattle. I felt exhausted, but also oddly peaceful. I'd faced my family. I'd heard Grandma J stand up for me in a way no one ever had. I'd survived Christmas, and I hadn't fallen apart. On the plane, I pulled out my phone and started writing. Not a letter this time, but a list. A list of everything I wanted for my life going forward. I want to feel valued. I want to teach in a way that makes a difference. I want relationships that are reciprocal, where I give and receive in equal measure. I want to stop apologizing for taking up space. I want to believe that I deserve good things. I want to be brave, even when it's hard. I want to build a life that feels like mine. When I got back to Seattle, Maya picked me up from the airport. How was it? She asked. Awful and amazing, I said. Grandma J called everyone out. It was incredible. And how do you feel? I feel like I'm finally becoming the person I was always supposed to be. Grandma J died in March, 3 months after Christmas. I flew home for the funeral. The whole family was there, and for once the tension was about grief instead of about me. At the wake, Emma pulled me aside. I've been in therapy, she said, talking about a lot of things, including how I treated you. I'm sorry, Becca. I'm really, really sorry. I appreciate that, I said, and I could hear that my voice was softer than it would have been 6 months earlier. less angry, more sad. Are you happy in Seattle? Yeah, I said. I really am. Good. You deserve to be happy. I'm just sorry it took you leaving for me to realize how much I missed having you around. At the funeral, I gave one of the eulogies. I talked about how Grandma J had taught me to be brave, how she'd shown me in the last months of her life that it was never too late to speak up for what was right, how she'd given me the greatest gift anyone had ever given me, permission to choose myself. After the funeral, back at Dad's house, people milled around eating casseroles and sharing memories. I was standing by the window, looking out at the backyard, when Tyler came up next to me. I've been an ass, he said without preamble. Yeah, I agreed. You have been. I talked to Stephanie about it, about how we acted about the Italy trip. She actually felt terrible, even though she'd never admit it in front of everyone else. We both did. Did you, though? Feel terrible? He was quiet for a moment. Honestly? Not at first. At first I just thought you were being dramatic. But then Grandma got sick and she kept talking about you, about how proud she was of you, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time anyone in this family had been that proud of me. Sure, Dad brags about my job, but that's different. That's about his ego, not about actually being proud of who I am as a person. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something I'd never noticed before. Tyler was tired, stressed, unhappy. Are you okay? I asked. He laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. No, I hate my job. I'm drowning in debt. My marriage is falling apart because Stephanie and I spend more time on our phones than talking to each other. But I can't admit any of that because I'm supposed to be the successful one. I'm supposed to have it all figured out. You don't have to be perfect, I said. You just have to be honest. Easy for you to say. You got out. You could get out too. It's not too late to make changes. He shook his head. I'm not as brave as you. Maybe not yet, but you could be. I left Dad's house that day and flew back to Seattle, back to my sunny apartment and my challenging job, and my life that finally felt like it belonged to me. I didn't know if my family would ever really change. I didn't know if we'd ever have the kind of relationship I'd always wanted, but I did know that I'd changed. I'd learned to stand up for myself. I'd learned that being kind to yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. I'd learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family. A year later, I was named Teacher of the Year at my school. My students threw me a surprise party, and I cried happy tears as they presented me with a giant card they'd all signed. Emma flew to Seattle for the celebration. She'd quit medical school, something that had shocked the whole family, and was now working as a paramedic and loving it. I'm learning to do what makes me happy, she told me over dinner, instead of what makes Dad happy. It's terrifying, but also amazing. Tyler sent a card and a gift card to a nice restaurant. Inside the card, he'd written, "Proud of you, little sis. You were right to leave. Maybe someday I'll be brave enough to follow your example." Dad called. Our conversations were still stiff, still awkward, but they were happening. He'd started therapy at Mom's insistence, and he'd actually apologized, a real apology, for how he'd treated me. Mom sent flowers to my school. The card read, "We love you and we're proud of you." It wasn't perfect. We weren't a perfect family with a perfect, happy ending. But we were trying, and maybe that was enough. 2 years after the Italy trip that I never took, I finally went to Italy. But I went on my own terms with Maya and Amanda on spring break from school. We stayed in small towns and ate amazing food and walked for miles and miles. We threw coins in the Trevi Fountain and climbed to the top of the Duomo in Florence and watched the sunset from a hillside in Tuscany. The trip was everything I'd dreamed it would be and more. We spent a week in Rome, walking until our feet ached, eating gelato twice a day, sitting in piazzas and watching life unfold around us. I stood in the Colosseum and thought about all the history contained in those ancient stones. I visited the Vatican and stood in the Sistine Chapel, neck craned back to see Michelangelo's ceiling, tears streaming down my face at the beauty of it. We took a train to Florence and spent days wandering through the Uffizi Gallery, standing in front of Botticelli's Birth of Venus for so long that the guards started giving us strange looks. We climbed to the top of the Duomo, all 463 steps, and looked out over the red tile roofs of the city, breathing hard and laughing at how out of shape we were. We rented a car and drove through Tuscany, getting lost on winding country roads, stopping in tiny towns whose names we couldn't pronounce. We had long lunches at family-run trattorias where the owners brought us dish after dish, refusing to let us pay full price because they liked us. We stayed in an agriturismo on a working farm, where the owner's grandmother taught us to make fresh pasta, her hands gnarled with arthritis, but still moving with practiced grace. One evening, we were sitting outside a small restaurant in a town called Montepulciano, drinking local wine and watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Maya and Amanda were talking about whether to order dessert, debating the merits of tiramisu versus panna cotta, and I felt this wave of contentment wash over me. "I'm happy," I said, interrupting their dessert debate. They both looked at me. I know that sounds simple, but I'm really, truly happy. Like, genuinely happy in a way I don't think I've ever been before, and I needed to say it out loud. Maya raised her wine glass. To happiness, to choosing yourself, to becoming the person you were always meant to be. We clinked glasses, and I thought about the long journey that had brought me to this moment. The pain, the anger, the fear, the growth, the healing. All of it had been necessary. All of it had brought me here. Standing there, looking out at the rolling hills and the ancient buildings and the purple sky, I thought about the girl I'd been 2 years earlier. The one standing in Dad's driveway with her suitcase, watching her family leave without her. I thought about how devastated I'd been, how small I'd felt, how sure I'd been that I'd never recover from that rejection. And I realized something. That moment, as terrible as it was, had been the beginning of my real life. It had forced me to stop waiting for other people to see my value and start seeing it myself. It had pushed me out of my comfortable, suffocating existence and into something bigger, scarier, and infinitely better. I wouldn't change what happened. I wouldn't go back and fix it or prevent it or make it easier. Because that pain, that exclusion, that moment of being left behind, it had taught me the most important lesson I'd ever learned. Sometimes being left behind is the first step toward finding yourself. Sometimes rejection is redirection. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the catalyst for the best thing you ever do. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the Tuscan sunset. I posted it to social media with a simple caption, "Worth the wait." Within minutes, comments started coming in. From my students, from Maya and Amanda, from Emma, from Tyler, even from Dad. But the comment that made me cry came from an account I didn't recognize at first. Then I realized it was Grandma Jay's old account, now managed by one of my cousins as a memorial page. The comment was one of Grandma Jay's old posts, shared as a memory. It was from years ago, a photo of me at my college graduation, and she'd written, "This girl right here is going to change the world. Just you wait and see." I stood there on that hillside in Italy, crying and smiling at the same time, and I whispered to the sky, "You were right, Grandma. You were right." I wasn't changing the world in some grand, dramatic way. I wasn't curing cancer or brokering peace treaties or inventing revolutionary technology. But I was changing my corner of the world. I was showing up for my students. I was building authentic relationships. I was living honestly and bravely and fully. And I was happy. Really, truly happy. Not because everything was perfect, but because I'd learned that happiness isn't about having a perfect family or a perfect job or a perfect life. It's about knowing who you are, standing up for yourself, and building a life that reflects your values. It's about being brave enough to walk away from what diminishes you and toward what grows you. It's about understanding that you can't control how other people treat you, but you can control how you respond. You can control whether you stay in relationships that hurt you or whether you choose yourself. That night, back at our hotel, Maya raised her glass of wine. To Rebecca, she said, who took the worst thing that ever happened to her and turned it into the best decision she ever made. To Rebecca, Amanda echoed. I clinked my glass against theirs. To choosing yourself, I said. Even when it's scary. Especially when it's scary. We drank to that, to courage and change and second chances. And I thought about how 2 years ago, I would have given anything to be on that family trip to Italy. How I would have done anything to be included, to be valued, to matter to them. But sitting there with Maya and Amanda, with a future full of possibility ahead of me and a past I'd finally made peace with behind me, I realized I'd gotten something better than a family trip. I'd gotten myself. And that, I was learning, was the greatest gift of all.